Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of Synthesis Review Term 3. For this second part, I'll be looking at the very troublesome trio, as I call them, the troublesome trio of who, whom, and whose. These are three connectors that are very related. At the same time, they function similarly, but they have different usages and structures. So I'll be going through the three of them one by one, and then I'll try to do a little bit of a summary and comparison at the end of this video. So follow me, bear with me as I go through these structures because they can be rather confusing, the troublesome trio, who, whom, and whose. Alright? So first of all, who. Notice in the bracket V, that stands for verb. So the word that comes immediately after the connector who is very often a verb, right? So the subject indicates additional information provided about the sentence, the subject of the sentence. So in this case, the subject that comes before the word who is going to be given more information when I add the word who. Okay, so begin always in using the connector who by identifying the subject in the question, right, before you write down the answer. Identify any additional information that follows the subject. I'll model this for you shortly. Okay, place the additional information between two commas. Remember, the two commas that must always follow the use of who. And finally, delete any repeated words or, if need be, replace them with pronouns. Notice the color coding. You'll see these same color codes appear in the sample questions and answers that we're going to go through. Alright, so pay attention to them. Red usually denotes nouns and noun phrases. Blue denotes verbs. Yellow denotes punctuation. And green denotes pronouns that replace subject and object nouns. Okay, right, so let's take a look at the first one. Ziqi washes her hair 5 times a day. Alright, Ziqi has the longest hair in class. Okay, so first of all, subject is Ziqi, right? Very good. Second of all, additional information about the subject. Yeah, has the longest hair in class. That's the additional information. Okay, so let's go ahead. Ziqi, comma, so always remember first comma comes after subject. Who has the longest hair in class. So remember additional information follows the connector who has the longest hair in class. Another comma after the additional information. Washes it 5 times a day. So her hair, because we already have the longest hair in class, is repeated. So I replace her hair with it. Her longest hair, it, 5 times a day. Okay, so who, always followed by a verb. Ziqi, who has. Alright, so the distinctive quality of who as a connector is that it always pairs itself with the verb. Alright, who has the longest hair. Right, Ziqi, who has the longest hair. Take note of the position of the commas, one after the subject, one after the additional information about the subject. Okay, so you can imagine that these two commas are like brackets that indicate the additional information I'm adding to the subject. Ziqi, who? Oh, the one who has the longest hair in class. So that's the two commas functioning as brackets that add information to my subject. So don't forget these two commas. Now, if you want to be safe in the exams and you're worried that you may have written one comma without the other, then omit these two commas. Either have no commas or two. Because in the case of who, whom, and whose, right, you either must have two commas or you have none. You take them away. So if you want to be safe, remove these two commas. Don't even put a single one. That way you won't be penalized for missing out a comma, right? But if you want to be very precise and accurate, then two commas divides the sentence up into 3 parts, which makes it much easier to read. So Ziqi, pause, who has the longest hair in class, pause, washes it 5 times a day. Alright? Very good. Next, whose. And you'll notice in the brackets the letter N, which stands for the noun. Alright? So whose pairs with a noun. It functions very similar to who in that it indicates the relationship with the subject, but in this case it's not additional information, it's belonging. Okay, so something belonging to the subject. Therefore, first we must identify the subject like we did with who. Then we identify what belongs to the subject. Okay, then we place the additional information between two commas. Remember, they function like brackets. And we delete any repeat words, replace them with commas, with pronouns. They're very similar in the steps that we follow for whose as well as with who. Okay, but remember the crucial difference is the word after whose, the pair, is a noun and not a verb. Okay, so let's take a look. Chloe staggered breathlessly up the stairs. Her file weighed a ton. Okay, so let's begin by identifying the subject, Chloe, right? Then what belongs to Chloe? It's her file, isn't it, right? So Chloe, subject, her file, item that belongs to her, all right? So I can already begin by constructing Chloe, comma, so after subject, comma, whose file weighed a ton, right? So whose file. So the word whose replaces her file, right? So I don't need to write her file anymore because whose links Chloe to the file, all right? The file belongs to Chloe. So Chloe, whose file weighed a ton, again, after the additional information, put another comma, that's a bracket, staggered breathlessly up the stairs, okay? So whose, always followed by a noun, right? Chloe, whose file. James, whose dog. Alan, whose cat. Mr. Pang, whose lorry. Okay, so the word that comes after whose is always what belongs to the subject. Mr. Pang's lorry, right? James's cat. Alex's dog, right? All right, let's move on to the next section for whom, and you'll see that whom takes on a noun, very similar to how whose took on a noun, right? But whom is more related to who because it provides additional information about the subject of the sentence, right? So again, identify the subject, identify additional information that follows that subject, place the additional information between two commas that act as brackets, and finally delete any repeated words or replace them with pronouns, very much like who and whose. The steps are similar. Okay, so let's try this. Jacksith plays tennis with Roger Federer every weekend. I hired Jacksith as my tennis coach. So Jacksith is the subject of this sentence, right? Jacksith, right? And again, in this case, what's the additional information about Jacksith? Jacksith was the coach that I hired, right? So there you go. Jacksith, comma after the subject, whom I hired as my tennis coach. I took away Jacksith because Jacksith has now come to the front. So whom I hired as my tennis coach. Another comma to close off the additional information. Plays tennis with Roger Federer every weekend. So Jacksith, whom I hired as my tennis coach, plays tennis with Roger Federer every weekend. So whom always takes on a noun or a pronoun. All right, in this case, the pronoun I. Whom is always followed by a noun or a pronoun. Jacksith, whom I. James, whom I saw at the mall. Alan, whom I met at the bus stop. James, whom she bumped into at Orchard Road, is my teacher. Okay, so whom she, whom I, whom they, these are all nouns or pronouns. So whom always pairs up with a noun. All right, so remember, keep calm, don't get confused between the troublesome trio of who, whom, and whose. All right, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. And I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you, and I hope you guys have fun over the long weekend. This shouldn't take you too long to finish. Bye.